Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 276 of the Dudes and Beer podcast. I am Chris Jordan, your host. Do not forget, we are now officially brought to you by podcastcadet.com. If you are a fan of podcasting like I am, want to start up a show for yourself, your friends, your family, your church, your business, your school, whatever, just for fun, stop on by podcastcadet.com today. Use the code DUDES20 to save 20% off your entire cart. All they do is podcasting, folks. Literally, they do podcast audits. They will help you with distribution. They'll help you figure out new social media schemes, all kinds of stuff. One-on-one podcast consultation is all that we provide there. So stop on by podcastcadet.com today. DUDES20 is the code that you want to use. I also want to give a quick shout-out to our good friends out in Las Vegas, T-Shirt Toad. That is owned by our good friend and listener, Mr. Caffey out there. We love Shannon Caffey. He is always tuned into Dudes and Beer, and we want to thank you so much for these absolutely awesome shirts. I'm wearing one of the HC Universal Network shirts right now from him. They're utterly comfortable. They're great if you need T-shirts for your band, merch, for your podcast, anything like that. Go on and check them out. tshirttoad.com is where you can find them. Our guest tonight, everybody, I am so entirely excited. I have probably done conglomerately more preparation for this show than even like our 5-hour-long forays at the Mikamoto auction. Stuff like that, where it was like 5 hours long, straight live, guest after guest after guest. I literally watched the show Lost Gold of World War II, one of my favorite shows to watch on the road, twice through. The second season just finished on broadcast, just became available for purchase on platforms like Amazon. That's where I purchased it and watched it. And I got to tell you, I watched the entire series, both seasons, twice in a row over the last week preparing for this. The documents that we're going to be talking about tonight are, of course, in the Dudes and Beer Knowledge Vault. So make sure and stop on by dudesandbeer.com, head over to the Knowledge Vault, and where you want to go is the declassified section, which is the top section now in the Knowledge Vault. And you will see all of the MacArthur in Japan, CIA report on Russian gold in Manchuria, Rojas versus Marcos, treasure stolen from Hunter. All those documents are what we will be talking about tonight with our amazing guest, Bingo Minerva, lead investigator for Lost Gold of World War II on the History Channel. Let's check out a clip real quick before we bring Bingo on that will kind of set the tone a little bit of our show tonight, talking about Yamashita's lost gold, talking about the search for it, the search that went on for it, the search that is ongoing for it, and the way that this stuff kind of ties into the CIA and other things. Here is a clip from Season 2, Episode 6 of Lost Gold of World War II.
In the U.S., Bingo is learning that knowledge of Yamashita's treasure could have reached as far as the Oval Office.
I have here material that quite explicitly shows that General MacArthur was knowingly involved in capitalizing on this loot that the Japanese had stolen, but also that he knew how it could be used.
While researching connections between the U.S. government and Yamashita's treasure, Roland uncovered recently declassified documents drafted by General MacArthur to President Harry Truman.
This is a report from MacArthur. Now, these documents were not publicly available at the time. Okay. So what we have is declassified information, and the fact that he has actually found this treasure and has declared that he can keep it.
These are MacArthur's words right here.
We have legal right to access all of these valuables, precious metals and stones belonging to the Japanese government and valuables belonging to designated individuals. So anyone scheduled by SCAP, Supreme Commander, who is MacArthur himself.
Now, he's saying they can legally do that.
Exactly. If you're the Supreme Commander of your occupation, you can declare what the law is.
What do they do with this information? I mean, they know treasure's out there. They know there's a great amount of wealth there. I mean, why was he even interested in this?
World War II may be over, but America is on the verge of the Cold War. The USSR and the United States are building up their nuclear...
And that's where we start getting into our story, folks. That's where we really start kind of leveraging the rocks out of the way, starting to uncover some of the dirt in history that covers this up. Once again, please welcome to the show lead researcher for Lost Gold of World War II, Bingo Minerva. How are you doing today, Bingo?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for, the massive hours of entertainment, both on the road for myself and others who hang out in my room while we're on the road. Cheers to all my road family out there. Watching these shows on History Channel, because my brain is just constantly rabbit holing on this stuff. And to have shows like yours come out and confirm these things that I have heard for years. Like I told you privately in our messages back and forth over the last day or so, I normally try not to have just like the armchair quarterback on talking about a conspiracy theory. I prefer to have somebody of some education on. Like I said, I waited 5 years to do a show on secret societies until I could find somebody that wasn't an armchair conspiracist. So to find somebody like you that has been digging into these annals of history, so to speak, and uncovering things like the Black Eagle Fund, also known as the M Fund, the fact that MacArthur himself was directly in charge of everything that was recovered of Axis property, that is looted materials, everything. And for you to be finding this information must be an eye-opening experience for you. I guess let's get started with where things got started, because you didn't start out your life as like a researcher. So how did you come to work with the History Channel? How did you come to be involved with the show Lost Gold of World War II and become lead researcher for that?
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, it definitely wasn't a career choice, being research or history, for that matter. I grew up in the real estate industry. It's a family business. My father was a banker. My mother was in escrows and transaction. All the open door canvassing neighborhoods, for leads. I did all that growing up, eventually getting my license in 2004. Now, through that business, we met a number of us in business years. Introduced our family to Daryl Miklos, who starred in Cooper's Treasure that was aired on Discovery Channel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we met Daryl Miklos through one of our business partners. Talked with him a while. We were talking about the show. And eventually, we were sharing stories. We were talking about Yamashita's Treasures as one of them, and he was talking about his foray into marine excavation. But he eventually introduced me to Ari Mark, which is one of the CEOs of Ample Entertainment. And after that, the rest was history, pun intended. The funny thing originally, there was actually somebody else that was set to be the researcher for the show. Now, it didn't work out, and Ample asked if I wanted to do it. So they had someone from History Channel set up a casting interview. Shortly after that, I was sent paperwork to make it final.
Wow. And that's so often the story, the fact that these things just happen organically. It literally came from an interesting conversation with another interested party that you had, and
definitely.
And like I said, what has it been like for you, for somebody who didn't do this? Because, I spent my time in journalism as a producer, putting documents like what I sent you together, tracking down documents, like what I got together for the show today, like the actual court documents between the Marcos family and the Rojas family. You know, with a little bit of diligent digging, you can find these things, and you can see the fact that, like, no, this happened. Like, this guy was jacked for millions of dollars by the president of the Philippines.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it that way. Like, you know, when you have a presidency going after, you know, the little guy for what seemingly almost billions of dollars. Yeah, it's crazy to wrap your mind around.
Well, but, yeah, precisely. And when you're someone who doesn't really come from that field, that's not necessarily like you are a historian, a teacher. It's not like what you do. You might be someone like me who's a weekend warrior and just rabbit holes on topics that are interesting to them, and just absorbs things like a sponge. But to have stepped into this world and to have stepped into exactly like the clip from Rolling Celts, just like he said, to step into such a dangerous world, to step into quite literally something that, hey man, like the CIA was actively a part of this. Like this is where the CIA got their original funding, supposedly, is from hustling this money from the Japanese government. And when you start seeing things like the document that we have up on screen right now, which is the active, fully unredacted, unclassified document shown by Rolling Celts in that interview. You can go check it out, folks. I read the entirety of the 329 pages.
That's intense.
Well, and, you know, I read it because I was looking specifically for the section, because I looked and looked and looked, and I found the document name, and I was like, aha, there it was in a frame. I paused it, and I found it. So I found the fully unredacted, unclassified document, but I could not find the page number anywhere. I kept trying to pause the video, like when he was flipping pages, like, can I like zoom in on a page number, anything? Because this is a
Should've
big.
just called me.
But at the same time, it's the fact of I took the time to read the 329-page document, and some of the things that went on even beyond that, as Supreme Allied Commander. You know, the fact that he was in charge of propaganda, the fact that he was in charge of the trials that went on.
He had his hand in everything.
Yeah.
Literally everything.
Yeah. And powers beyond the means of president. And it's really interesting once you start breaking that document apart and really reading in depth what they went through, what they did. It's absolutely phenomenal. So for you to be deep diving into this in your life must be extraordinarily interesting right now, especially some of the revelations that came about in season 2 recently.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just going to think about it, like I said, it wasn't something that I chose as a career path, you know, and I'm a history buff now. But you know, I did horrible in history studies growing up throughout school. I think Greek mythology, Roman, and Egyptian history were about the only things that really caught my attention.
Yeah.
But, you know, I grew up in the 80s. Movies were a big influence. You got The Goonies and Indiana Jones, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. More recently, Tomb Raider, National Treasure. You know, it's an interesting thing, you know, trying to find something that's been lost for a great number of years and solving a mystery that no one's ever solved.
Yeah,
I never thought in a million years that I'd be, you know, that I'd have an opportunity to be a part of a team working to uncover just that.
Yeah, precisely. And like you said, so many movies have come out about things like this. So many shows like Cooper's Treasure, so many shows like the amazing Curse of Oak Island, who I am actively working on right now, audience. I'm working my connections and milking them hard on various platforms, getting up that ladder. But to even connect with you and to be able to intellectually talk about this, to be able to talk about the documents that you found, the things that you have begun to uncover, let's really start kind of cracking the nut that is Yamashita's gold, what we historically know about it, and how Yamashita came to figure into this to begin with, and how MacArthur came to figure into it.
Sure, sounds good. Well, I'll preface this by saying I am by no means an expert on this topic, but I've done a fair bit of research in this area, and hopefully, can offer some insight as to what I've found.
Well, and the main thing is you have talked to the experts on this.
That works as well.
you have had the active conversations. I have the audio clips, Bingo.
On the internet. It's forever.
So, let's kind of start getting into this. What is, because a lot of people don't know that there was like a hoard of treasure, other than the Nazi treasure that was found after World War II. But there was an entire Japanese hoarding and looting going on as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of all of Southeast Asia, Japan was looting all of that Asian mainland, mainly to enrich all of Japan's oligarchs. It wasn't to enrich the Japanese people. They were hoping all this looting would fund their war efforts to expand into the world. So all that treasure, being taken from a great number of countries. I think it was 11 or 12 countries total that Japan looted.
Yep.
And then, eventually brought to what they supposedly people think is the Philippines, and then ultimately on to Japan itself. Just this massive network of moving this great amount of treasure from not just, one generation. We're talking ancient treasures from all sorts of civilizations. Yeah. I mean, because you're talking all the countries they looted. Not only, were they looting banks, and they were looting all kinds of institutions, private homes. It wasn't just precious minerals and metals and stones. They were looting things like sewing machines. They were looting things like typewriters, automobiles, anything that can help enrich Japan's economy and further them as a greater power in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And like you were saying, cars, farm machinery, industrial machinery, anything that they could melt down for, like even ingots of lead to make shot. It was anything and everything that they could rally together to make their war effort happen. It was exactly on the same level of ours, as far as, hey, everybody, collect your lard so we can make explosives. They had the exact same campaigns going on. The only difference was that they were actively looting their conquered neighbors, that they were going and taking over air bases in the Philippines and things like that.
Exactly.
So as they looted these cultural treasures, and as they looted the banks and things like that, all of this stuff kind of became hidden behind closed doors.
Yeah, I mean, it really didn't get a lot of publicity, so to speak. I mean, like as you were saying, the Nazi side of the war gets a great number of documentaries, movies, and it's shown very well, and people are very well knowledged in that field. But it's very rare to see, people that know a lot about the Asian side of the war and the Japanese and what they were doing on those, those other countries. It wasn't until, I guess you could say, Pearl Harbor where, they really became something,
Well,
that's where a lot of people turn their attention to.
Yeah, precisely. And it really was the fact of that was most definitely catalyst for us jumping both feet in to the war. And the European theaters definitely got most of the attention. But everything in Japan happened so entirely fast as far as timeline for war, things like that go. Like but when it happened, it was incredibly brutal at the same time. The style of fighting was totally different. The things that were happening and the way in which combat was engaged was totally different. And that's some of the things that y'all are even coming up against. I know you aren't necessarily involved in the dig part of things, and you can't really speak to the dig part of things because a lot of that is still part of production, that kind of stuff. But some of the things that have been revealed about the dig is that it was very common for them to build tunnels through the hillside to be able to flank opponents as they came in. Things like that. And that's a lot of what y'all are finding when you're searching for these tunnels that supposedly contain the treasure. that kind of stuff is kind of like where Rojas found his treasure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the interviews I did this year was with P.J. Springer, and he's a military historian who I met in Alabama. Now, he was saying that Japan, they would either they mainly use existing tunnels as they could find them just for strategic purposes, and they would be in the hillsides of, all over the Philippines, and they would use that as a way to attack Americans as they were coming in, because they would use it strategically as if Americans were to pass over them, they'd come up behind them, flank them from behind, and attack them that way. It was so much so that the Americans set up a training facility in Hawaii just for tunnel warfare, just to prepare their soldiers for warfare in tunnels. And it got to the point where Americans were using like a liquid napalm to bomb these tunnel entrances. They wouldn't even attempt to go at tunnel entrances. Yeah. They would use napalm, which would then either burn Japanese soldiers or asphyxiate them by, all that fire, drawing all the oxygen out of the air.
Yeah, that's really where the first hardcore uses of flamethrowers, things like that, was really started, was in the Pacific Theater. Uh-huh. And, even to see some of the stuff like you were talking about, their tunnels, to see the booby traps that they have left behind. They went as far in their war efforts to design terracotta landmines that were triggered in the exact same way that a normal landmine is. It was just made out of terracotta so that you couldn't detect it with a metal detector. And that was literally mother of invention. It was the fact of, like we were saying, they did not have enough metal just to go around and start making landmines to blow up.
No, exactly. They're definitely resourceful. I mean, you think about just the amount of engineering that would go into even an operation, such as this, and booby trapping and making sure they're not getting their own guys, right? It's just kind of intense to think about. Yeah,
precisely. When you're talking about things like bottles of cyanide being buried under the ground, so when people dig, water traps, all kinds of just wild engineering, and the connections to the Nazis with some of that are absolutely amazing. Let's start going into some of General Yamashita and his history, the Golden Lily, things like that, and start getting into a little bit of this treasure, where it came from, and how we get to today and the hunt that exists now.
Sure. What part did you want to start? Should we just dive right into Golden Lily?
Yeah. Let's go straight into Golden Lily, because that is really where it all starts.
Okay. So, funny little tidbit here. For the last 70 years or so, treasure hunting in the Philippines can almost be considered a national pastime. Everybody over there knows Yamashita's treasure. And the funny thing about that, it's not even Yamashita's treasure by definition. It's actually imperial treasure that belonged to the emperor. The name Yamashita's treasure came from when President Marcos said, "I found Yamashita's treasure," and he said that in an interview. But again, by definition, it's imperial treasure. So Emperor Hirohito, in the spring of 1936, he put his brother Prince Chichibu in charge of a secret palace agency that would essentially supervise all looting and make sure that treasure got back to imperial coffers. And that was all looting throughout all the South Asia. Now, this agency was called the Kin no Yuri, or Golden Lily, which was named after one of Emperor Hirohito's poems. Now, the whole idea of looting the Asian mainland, again, was to enrich Japan's oligarchs, not to enrich the Japanese people. So as far as the public's aware, is the members of the Golden Lily is Emperor Hirohito, Prince Chichibu, and General Yamashita. And that's kind of the Golden Lily Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, and it really is that connection between people that gets things moving, gets things going. It was under the orders from the emperor that he take things and start hiding them at select locations. That is where they came up with the Golden Lily codes and the way that they encoded their maps, basically. And with that in mind, let's start getting into Bob Curtis a little bit, because, well, I guess before that we would have to get into Marquardt. and how the finding of this treasure, or at least some of it, during World War II, because there is a part. Let me bring it up here on screen for everybody, because there is actively a part that talks about just a small amount of the treasure that was found, and that was page 62 of our document here. If you go to it, folks. Literally starts talking about occupation troops were constantly uncovering. That's my favorite part. Constantly uncovering caches of precious metals and gems, which either were Japanese origin or looted from individual countries. On the 14th of January, 8th Army troops in the China Prefecture found 62 tons of silver in one cache. And that's an incredible tonnage. 62 tons. Yeah. That's just one cache. He's like, yeah, they were just out and about one day, stumbled across this cave, and hey, look at that. There's 62 tons of silver bullion. That's just phenomenal. And when you start talking about things like that, when you start talking about the fact that as far as we know, to most calculations, there were 220 tons, 220 metric tons of gold bullion taken and looted and hidden away somewhere, spirited away.
And that's just what's reported.
Yeah, that's just what's reported from things, folks. That's what can be accounted for. That was like, yeah, Japan came and took this from us. And
yeah, and I mean, even more so, the crazier thing about that is that only 20%, roughly 20% of it is estimated that has actually been recovered and brought back to the countries from which they originated from.
Yeah,
20% out of that. How many metric tons?
Yeah, so yeah, 10 metric tons, 12 metric tons. That's insane. That's an insane. Yeah. Even that, even what's just been found so far. Is an insane amount. Now, like we were saying, General Marquardt, who was basically, for the Pacific Command, folks, the head of MacArthur's economic and scientific branch. And he was really a kind of spearhead, tip of the spear, as far as going to, I believe it's, I've got the statistics here. Where it is actively money laundered through 172 banks in 42 foreign countries to create what is known as the M Fund or Black Eagle Trust. And that's just the documents that have Marquardt's name on them, that we can trace back to him. And that in and of itself is crazy, to know that President Truman was made aware of this gold, or Eisenhower, rather. But
I think it was Eisenhower, yeah. And then him, General MacArthur, there was a lot of hands really high up in our own government, that supposedly had a hand in this.
Yeah, exactly. And people working in concert, in accord with each other, to basically create this fund that could be dipped into, like Roland was saying earlier, to be able to fund anti-communist things coming up in the future Cold War, in any kind of, as I was saying, propaganda campaigns that they're doing against foreign governments, because they were actively doing propaganda and repatriation campaigns right there in the Pacific Theater, that MacArthur was in charge of actively. Like, it's there in the documents, folks. Go check them out on the Knowledge Vault. Download them for yourself. Get your own copy today.
Like you were saying, Roland Keltz, he's done a great deal of research on this topic. But like the CIA connection, the M Fund, the Black Eagle Trust, prior to these documents being declassified, there was really no trustworthy evidence of any kind of trust or fund that was used by the CIA. Up until Roland, it was just kind of one of those things that's just a legend that a lot of people tell stories about. And I'm paraphrasing from his research, but the whole topic in itself, the M Fund, the Black Eagle Trust, is just a huge can of worms. The U.S. could clear up a ton of this, but they still, even though they declassified a lot of these documents, they still refuse to declassify a bunch of documents from the 1950s and the 1960s. And really, it's just a lot of rumors with no proof that an actual fund ever existed.
Yeah, and things like that are tough to prove. The one thing that I love recently, we had the professor who came on talking about secret societies, and he's a full-on tenured history professor. Last year of teaching for 30 years, in the realm of he taught Russian U.S. intelligence history. And he was like, the one thing I've learned over my 30 years of research into this is be ready to believe anything. Because it normally comes out that that's the case. When it's declassified years and years later, it seems like it's the stuff of science fiction or of fiction. But they get that stuff from somewhere. It doesn't just pop up out of nowhere.
I had interviews on season 1 that history decided not to air because seemingly it seemed like, honestly, when I went into, again, it was my first kind of foray into television. Yeah. But at the time, the things he was saying about, because he had information on the Black Eagle Trust. He had some gold notes, and he worked for an insurance company that oversaw some of those gold notes from the Black Eagle Trust. But I admittedly, I was a bit too receiving on the information. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like, I can't believe the government would do that to us. And it came out really conspiracy-ish. Yeah. And in history, it's like, we can't air that. So we're going to just completely shut that down. But it's one of those things, in a story like this, when you have major governments involved, major superpowers almost. Yeah. And it's like, you think of, and you see things, you read about the things that they've done, and it's like, can we actually believe this? Did they really do that? Or is this kind of smoke and mirrors for something else?
Yeah, precisely. Because, that's come out in declassification as well. We have those documents that more than once they have done things for years and years under the guise of something else. And that is a standard procedure. That is a standard operating procedure in these cases, to hide and obfuscate things for years and years. Despite people looking, denying your requests, things like that. And there's been a lot of data dumps over the last few years from the CIA, where literally it's like, here's a few million pages of documentation.
Yeah, it's like, who's going to read through it?
Yeah, precisely. People like me.
There you go.
I will go
Here
through
we are talking about
and read through. Yeah, exactly. And that's how you find out. That's how you figure this stuff out. It's really interesting once you start breaking into it and start seeing things like the Black Eagle Trust. Like you said, it's really hard to pinpoint that to like any kind of money hustle, to be able to track that kind of black money. Those black funds that are sitting around in other places. But we do know from things that have come out over the many years, MK Ultra was one of them, through programs like Iran Contra.
Iran Contra is a big one.
Through things like Operation Phoenix that was going on prior to out of Manchuria, prior to the Vietnam War.
The crazy thing there, Iran Contra, the Operation Phoenix, all that stuff out of Manchuria, it ties into this as well.
Yeah. No,
it's all tied, and it's just crazy. Again, it's one of those things where it's like you can't believe it because it's so out there.
Well, and
once you kind of follow the money and you kind of follow the people involved, it's like, oh, okay, well, that actually makes sense.
Well, and once you start seeing that, there were these crazy accounts with billions of dollars in it, or the equivalent of billions of dollars now, that were started by General Marquardt. And he was part of the founding of the CIA. And like, I've got the document right here in front of me, from the CIA, declassified, talking about them looking into gold deposits in Manchuria that the Russians had hidden away.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I sent that one to you. I was like, I don't even know if you've ever seen this, but check it out. Because I'd never heard of it. I ran across it while I was deep diving and like acorn digging. You know?
Yeah, I have yet to read through the 300 or so pages. But
this one's only 5.
Oh, okay.
It's much easier. It's a much easier dive. But yeah, it starts going into like there is like a map of location straight up. Like, here we go. This is where we know Russia has gold. Like right here. Boom. There's some. Like
pockets just everywhere.
Yeah, just keep track of that, y'all. You know. And that was 1941.
Yeah, even before the war.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Where they were watching the alluvial gold deposits by Russia over in Manchuria. So when you start seeing the fact that those things go back that far, that these things do exist, that they are watching the movement of precious metals by foreign governments, it really it makes it hard not to follow the rabbit hole.
No, I mean, it's definitely interesting doing so. I mean,
what have been some of the things that you have come across? Because I've definitely had my moments, even with this show. Sure. I mean, I'm not going to say we're like banging, we're no Coast to Coast AM, nothing on that level. We have some great guests. We have some great topics. We talk about some in-depth stuff with some very professional people like yourself. And that's great. But I myself have had it changed the focus of this show when I started interviewing people like Dr. John Hall, and then I started getting emails from targeted individuals saying, like, I'm a targeted individual. Thank you so much for talking about this.
Cool.
And yeah, it really does kind of change the way that you look at things. It changes the way that you consider things. And even going through and talking with people like Mike Turber about Area 51 and UFOs and the Mandalay Bay shooting. He was one of the big releasers of information on the Mandalay Bay shooting. And after I had him on to see my LinkedIn profile get hit by like 85 people from the State Department.
Wow. Crazy.
It's crazy. Like, I've never seen my LinkedIn profile say that 85 people from the State Department were looking at me, but it was that week. So it's like even my little show makes ripples. There are even times like whenever I had Anonymous on a few weeks ago where my wife was like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Like, our sites came under active attack. Like, because I was having a member of Anonymous on my show. That's
intense. The internet's a crazy place, man. That's for sure.
Yeah. And you think that these things are just out there and it's just hoodoo until it starts happening to you. What have you experienced so far just in your tenure, the 2 seasons that you have been working on Lost Gold of World War II? What are some of the things that have really come to light for you that are like, wow, this is a first-time experience?
It's been, like I said, this is the first time in television, first time doing anything like this. It's been really strange getting like the feedback we've gotten. Again, because I'm not too big on social media. If you go on any of my social media feeds, you'll see I do maybe 1 or 2 birthday posts a year.
Yeah.
And, that's that. But
yeah.
Just the feedback we get from the fans, and I'm like, wow, this is really reaching like kind of all over the world. I got people in Hungary, Budapest, and Philippines, China, everywhere, like just reaching out saying, hey, man, love the show. You know what? We're actually working on a treasure site too. Can you send us funding? I'm like, I don't actually control the funding, but
can you send me some funding?
Can you send funding? I get that one a lot. He's like, hey, do you want your team to come out here? And like literally hundreds of requests a week. And I have to kind of do like, the copy and paste, sorry, we get hundreds of these a week. We can't really help everybody. It's not really fair. But
yeah, exactly. And that's why, whenever you're like, sorry it took so long to get back to you, I was like, I get it.
And then the funny thing there is like that literally took a year to get back to you. It's like, let me go talk to the PR and see if they'll approve this interview. And then it got bombarded by like all the other messages from people asking about the show.
Well, because
I was cleaning out my box one day. I'm like, Christopher Jordan. Oh my God, I completely forgot about this guy.
It had to have been probably halfway through the airing of season 1.
Exactly.
That I first contacted you, because I was like, what is this? It was the first time that History Channel had enough episodes to do like a half-day marathon. You know, like they do with everything.
Pretty early, and like I said, I responded. I'm like, you know what? Let me check with A&E because I'm sure they have protocol. I probably have to check in with them.
Yeah,
I did. I got it approved, but it completely just slipped my mind. I forgot to get back. Again, I apologize for that. But funny story.
It's a hilarious story because that is exactly how popular your show became so rapidly. Like, I contacted you, and much like our contacts back and forth over the last week or so, it's been pretty like, hey, yeah, cool. You know, it wasn't like, let me contact him and maybe I'll hear back from him in 3 months. You know, like the response was pretty quick and rapid. So when you said
until
like,
it wasn't.
well, and when you said what happened, like, yeah, makes total sense, man, because this show went off the charts rapidly. I mean, even if you go through and start watching the show from season 1, the things that start happen rapidly, as opposed to most shows of this type where it's like, maybe that's something like, no, man, y'all are finding something like of significance every single episode. And it's
I think for me also, like personally, I honestly, from season 1, I honestly didn't think I'd get a ton of feedback for myself because I wasn't really featured a lot in season 1. I had a couple of interviews here and there, but it wasn't more focused like they're doing this year. They're focusing a lot more on interviews and kind of my side of the story, which is really cool. But yeah, there's still, even then, there were so many people that reached out and, just thankful for all the fans, but sometimes it can get a bit overwhelming.
It does. It's
intense.
Yeah, it gets overwhelming very rapidly because whenever I worked broadcast, that was one of my things. I booked guests like you on the show. I did research for the show like what I did for this, where it's like, let me go find some documents, and then I answered emails that came in. And yeah, like, good God, man, we would get like 100 emails in 5 minutes if the show was not posted in time. Like,
crazy.
Like if people that were paid members didn't get their commercial free version like 15 minutes after broadcast, we got like 100 emails. Like, where's my version? Where's my hold on, fiend, you'll get it. And it's been that way for me, because this is one of those shows, like I said at the beginning, I don't really have cable. I am one of those people who, if I like a show, I will pay specifically for that show. I want my money to go directly to what I like. And I will pay $20 for a season all day long because I'm that dude that, I'm going to watch Lost Gold of World War II over and over and over. It'll be a background show, and the next time I'm coding with it in the background, my brain will click on to one more fact.
Well, I'm sure History and A&E appreciate the patronage, and like I said before, I appreciate the feedback.
Well, it's been really great to be able to, like I said, go through and really binge it, because most of the time I was watching it on the road. I would get to see it in 2-episode doses, in back-to-back things, stuff like that. So to be able to really sit down and absorb this, because as opposed to a lot of the shows that are similar, that I enjoy as well, from many of the same producers and networks, it's really the fact of there is so much history to be absorbed in this. And if you're a rabbit holer like me, where it's like, ooh, wait, what was that document that just flashed on screen? And you're going to go Google the document and download it and read it. There's something in there literally every episode, folks. And it's amazing. It's great. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. Let's talk for a minute. One of the clips that I wanted to play this evening is actually the I guess really the final words of Bob Curtis that you guys came across in season 2, amongst a bunch of tapes that were given to y'all from New Connection. I don't really want to give away a lot of the juice, but I do want to play this because I think it really lends a lot of credence to, number one, the story, to a lot of the legend. And in addition to that, I think it really lends a lot of credence to what you guys have found out from separate, unassociated sources in the show.
Yeah, agreed. It was definitely one of those aha moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hear from Bob's own words here.
My name is Robert H. Curtis. Have a sound mind. If you are listening to this tape, I am dead. The bearer of this tape must remain anonymous. Otherwise, his safety would be questionable. The fact that I am dead can be attributed to one of 3 factors: the Philippine government, our own CIA, or the precious metals cartel that I had fought for years has elected to eliminate me. In either event, this is a dying declaration. This tape will prove beyond anyone's doubt the truth of the story. It involves the death of millions of people, and the material that we're talking about has their blood on it. The world needs to know this. I have died because of it.
And those are as far as we know, some of the last words known from Robert Curtis. Let's get into Robert Curtis, his provenance, how he kind of fits into the matrix of this story, because he really is a linchpin in a lot of ways in the modern hunt for Yamashita's gold.
Sure. So Robert Curtis, he was actually the president of IPM, International Precious Metals Incorporation. It was a private LLC out of Nevada. He's also a businessman in Nevada and a metallurgist by trade. In 1975, President Marcos hired 4 Americans to look for gold, and Robert Curtis was one of those men. Now, Curtis's group, IPM, they supplied the maps, and I'm not sure how he had access to the maps, but apparently his group had the 175 maps, right, which marked an estimated 100 billion in treasure, and his group was used to track and recover about 14 billion of that. President Marcos eventually told Curtis that his services were no longer needed, and it was at that point where he started feeling for his life. You know, he burned the maps that he had in his possession. He fled to America. That's where we, come to the Las Vegas Sun, where he wanted to tell his story. Even at the Las Vegas Sun, when they were doing his interviews, they weren't aware of the death declaration the tapes. And that's one of the revelations that we bring to Brian Greenspun when I go visit him in Vegas. Wow. This was after all of this happened after he located a huge buried Japanese vault on the outskirts of Manila that was said to have about $8 billion in bullion.
Oh,
right. So all of this happened, after that. Now, according to Chuck McDougald, who I met this year as well, Marcos tried to have Curtis killed in 1978, but Curtis eluded those killers.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's pretty hairy at that point. But it was after he fled the U.S. That's where he started fearing for his life. He told the great story on the Las Vegas Sun, which was documented over the course of 3 decades. They aired this, or not they aired this. They printed this for 3 decades.
Well,
about Yamashita's treasure.
Yeah, and one of the big things, folks, is to remember that unwavering story. Whenever you go through and read those interviews, things like that, it's not a story that changes in detail. And it's a story that whenever you listen to him tell it, he tells with all sincerity. At least to my knowledge of reading people, it does not seem like he's acting, does not seem like he's making things up. Definitely seemed as though he had the evidence to be able to back things up. He had the provenance in the industry to be able to back that up. And
now, one thing I don't know if it's public or not, and I could be wrong, but I had access to the deposition tapes of Robert Curtis from the attorney that was overseeing the case for Roger Rojas versus Marcos.
Yep.
And in those same tapes, he was explaining, these exact things. He found treasure for Marcos. He was essentially changing the footprint for him, and that was his role, is to change the footprint of these bars so they wouldn't be traceable as to where they originated from.
Yeah, exactly.
That was his role in this whole legend of the gold.
Yeah, he was supposed to find the gold, re-smelt it, and re-ingot it. Mm-hmm. That was for part of profit, things like that. And then, of course, things went south, and hijinks ensue, as they do in every espionage movie. Because, I mean, like I said, this stuff is literally, like, it sounds like it should be the plot of, like, Cloak and Dagger Part 2, It is.
It's funny because it's funny you mention that, because every time I go on these interviews and I'm on the road, a movie I watch a lot is National Treasure, and there's like a lot of things in that movie that kind of echo what we're doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it seems like it is out of a movie, so it's kind of crazy in that aspect.
And it's just strange, Once one of the things that we talk about all the time on this show with people like Mike Turber, investigator, as well as John Hall, people like that, and with you right now, is the fact that once you learn to kind of see the forest and the trees, it's really hard to unsee the picture and how the picture is made.
Agreed.
And once you start to see how these strands of the web are tied together, it's not rocket math. Like it almost becomes like flares are being shot
rabbit hole.
Yeah,
it goes on forever.
It does. Like, dude,
and then it strands off into multiple different entities, and it's just you can get consumed by it. Many people have been.
Like I said, I have put 50 hours of research into
this show.
I said,
that's intense.
Into this show in 2 weeks. Just since we reconnected, and it was like, yeah, let's make this happen. It was like, ooh, wow, season 2 just came out. Heck yeah. And I watched both seasons twice, all the way through. There were some that I watched just spuriously, like on my phone, things like that. And then just reading documents and researching and looking for things and following the rabbit holes.
I sent you a link. Sorry to cut you off. I think I sent you a link also to History Channel's YouTube page.
Yeah.
They started doing these little kind of mini episodes, which is
it's
more
great.
Deeper dive into like some of the other episodes where there's kind of untold information where they can only do, a little 5-minute segment on something. But they do 10-minute episodes on History's YouTube, if you want to go check those out as well.
Yeah. I mean, the content that they are putting out for this show is absolutely fantastic. I have loved it. It has been thoroughly enjoyable. And what I love is that it's fully historically based. There's nothing here that, I mean, I've got documents right here. Like, they are declassified from the U.S. government with their stamp on them, so it's not like this stuff is made up.
Even with that, it's so far out there. Like, I still have a hard time believing a lot.
It is. And like you said, it's hard sometimes, like when the History Channel's like, oh, well, we can't use that one now. Because it's hard sometimes once you start hearing those same things from person after person.
Yeah, again, the conspiracy stuff, it just got kind of intense. And
it gets really
got
intense.
into, like, World Trade Center.
Oh, God, yeah.
And some other, it was all tied to, World Trade Center having Yamashita's gold under there, too. Okay, that's intense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, again, it can be believable when you follow the money, but it's just, that's just something they didn't want to cover.
Well, I mean, we all know that Rothschild got part of his money from the Black Eagle Fund, so, you see how easy that is? Like...
Right? I wish it was that easy.
Yeah, but unfortunately, like, even the stuff that we're talking about tonight, to go through and find the documents, read the documents, it's mind-boggling, it's mind-numbing to see the fact that, quite literally, General MacArthur had full control over all property found in the possession of Axis powers, whether it was theirs or looted. Theirs are
Absolutely.
looted.
The supreme commander of it all.
Yes, the supreme commander, like above all.
And he dubbed
else.
himself that. That's what I thought was funny.
Oh yeah, that's the best part of it. Well, and that's what's cool is this document, folks. If you go through and look at it, has like straight up the layout of the way that the command structure is in all of these different parts. And when you start looking at it, and it's like, here's the governmental part, Supreme Allied Commander, everybody else. Here's the economic part, Supreme Allied Commander, everybody else. It's like everything goes back to him. Everything goes back to him. And it's just it's crazy because he is one of those people that, I mean, good God, I grew up watching the cartoons about him from Friz Freeling when I was a kid. You know, all that kind of stuff. He was literally an American hero. And to see the fact that he was involved with something like this, the Black Eagle Fund or not, M Fund or not, there was definitely some looting going on our part.
Yep. Definitely.
Definitely
some.
Definitely a lot.
Pulling it back to the historical side of it, right?
Yeah,
so one of the main narratives that I follow for the M Fund is that, General MacArthur set up this fund, a number of secret trusts like the M Fund, and used this, for one, to bribe Japanese political leaders.
Yep.
We know that the Japanese LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party, their leaders accepted huge bribes from Washington. So we pull it back to 1960, Vice President Nixon. Then he turned the M Fund over to Prime Minister Kishi in return for kickbacks to Nixon's presidential campaign fund. Now, Kishi, he took billions from the fund himself for his own offshore accounts. He turned it then over to Prime Minister Tanaka, who moved more billions offshore. He even had to run a scam to cover his tracks for that, the 57 scam. Now, if you weren't aware of this, the 57 scam, here's how it worked. Prime Minister Tanaka had the Ministry of Finance in Japan print high-denomination promissory notes called the 57s. And Tanaka sold these promissory notes to wealthy individuals with the promise of huge returns on their maturity, right? Now, but Tanaka, he made them look different from, your normal Japanese bonds. So later, they could be denounced as forgeries. So he's selling these essentially forged notes that were, again, printed by the Ministry of Finance. So everybody who wasn't, tied to Tanaka, they'd lose their shirt in all this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, CIA, they definitely, I want to say they recovered treasure. It's very plausible. Did they start the Black Eagle Trust? Again, highly plausible, but...
the connections, and Roland is very careful in his wording. He's very good about it.
Very eloquent.
With the fact of, yes, there is massive evidence to show that there was something recovered.
Yeah.
That they found something, that they found a lot of something. Like I said, there was just the one instance of 62 metric tons of silver.
Of something.
Just the one. Just the one.
Yeah.
Like,
just the
where
one.
in one instant, like, it's just casually said. Like, they regularly ran across caches of precious metals and gems. In one instance, they found this. It's like, one time I found a $50 bill on the ground at the carnival. Like it's just a regular everyday story at the bar.
Occurrence. And it's like, where do they even get the scales to weigh this, right? Like that's
just
that
it.
Scale, right? That's
the industrial diamonds they found were in such quantity that they literally weighed them by the mass carat.
Yep. I believe the majority of those went back to the Dutch because they were the ones that actually kept a really good record of what was taken from them.
Yeah.
Now, majority of the other people, when they were repatriating this wealth back to the countries that were looted, it was to the point where again you weren't seeing dollar bills, you weren't seeing paper currency.
Yeah.
It was more things like raw material, ingots, and coins. So it was to the point where they were just shoveling these coins onto scales and saying, okay, well, you get X amount, you get this percentage of it.
Yeah.
Here's your 5 shovels worth.
Yeah.
And it was just that kind of scale. And it was just intense to see the pictures that PJ Springer in that
Yeah.
In that interview, he brought those down from the National Archives on what that what's it called? What those people were giving back, what the U.S. government was giving back to those countries.
Yeah, back the restitution that they were giving back to them in return. It was just, and like you said, literally pictures of burlap sacks of coinage, and just ammunition cases, just shoveled full of coins. And it's really hard to trace things like coins, stuff like that, to their original origin.
Especially if you're just smelting it anyways. You just melt it all down and remint them.
Well, and that's just it. And
Bob's your uncle.
When quite literally, Bob's your uncle in that moment. And to kind of bring that thought full circle, getting into Bob again and getting into your new connection that came about in season 2.
Mm-hmm.
How has that been for you guys? Being able to have somebody who was cohorts with Bob, who was there for some of it, who had first degree access to Bob's brain and actively to information that he had connection to.
For the guys, for all of us, it was kind of a renewed hope, finding something tangible, finding somebody that, had boots on the ground when Bob was there, because, season 1, I'm following this trail, carrot on a stick of like, let's find more information on Bob, get as much information on Bob, on Nippon Star, on anybody that had any ties to Ferdinand Marcos and the treasure. Right, and then season 2 comes about, and I meet Brian Greenspun, who talks about a guy that he interviewed, or the guy that was mentioned in his interviewed, Chuck McDougall.
Yeah,
it's like he might still be alive. He's in the Bay Area. Why don't you see if you can find him? Right. So I get to talking to him, and for the guys, when he says he has maps, and admittedly, I've seen some of the maps he had in his possession before, because a lot of his maps are very public knowledge, and that you can do a Google search on Yamashita treasure. You'll see some of these
found
maps.
the images.
They're in a number of books as well.
I found the images. Yeah.
So the thing there, the thing that really interested me in that moment, he had these 2 maps in particular, and when I say, man, I've never seen anything like this, he had these 2 waxed copies of maps that he believes were originals, and to me they look like originals, which we had authenticated later. But it was just the deal, the great deal of manufacturing that went into creating something like that was not something I've seen before. So to see something like that was cool. I mean, that was kind of an aha moment in that this is potentially tangible evidence, because who would go to these lengths to create a document like this to lead someone astray, right? It was just so good. It was, you couldn't help but think it was real.
Yeah, precisely. And when it starts lining up the way that it does, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but like I said, every single episode, something new like this is revealed, and it's closer and closer and closer, and if anything, closer in methodology each time.
Definitely.
Than it is just taking stabs in the dark like it is on some shows, which are great shows. I love them; they're fantastic. But
I mean, at the end of the day, it's an entertainment industry, and we're trying to entertain. But as long as we can throw some actual factual history in there, and people learn a thing or two about some history that has been forgotten, at the end of the day, we've done our job.
Well, precisely, because that's exactly what I try to do on this show, is the fact of, let's have a conversation about this. Let's talk to somebody about it, because it's quite obviously something that people want to talk about. But let's talk about it in the right way. Let's make sure to bring some history into it. Let's make sure to look at it through the lens of history. And like we learned with our conspiracy episode and that great history teacher at 30 years, the fact is, history is a constantly changing atmosphere. We are constantly learning new things about history. it's something that is typically written by the winners, and you may not find out the information from the losers till decades, possibly centuries later, sometimes. And even the way that these legends that have existed for low 60 years now, after World War II, are coming to light to be true, not just in the case of Rojas versus Marcos, but and in the cases of Bob, Curtis, things like that, but in what y'all are finding as well.
No, I agree. I mean, definitely uncovering a lot of things, definitely new to us, and I think new to the public that weren't widely available. So I think that's a really cool aspect of the job.
Yeah, and I guess what is the one thing that you have found that has really, I guess, caught your attention since you started doing this? Because like we said earlier, it was not your original calling. It's not what you originally did in life. Even my job, though it was probably my original calling, was not what I did in life for years and years. So since going on this journey, what has been the one thing that has really kind of caught your bug with stuff?
Man, that's a tough one to pinpoint. That really is. I mean, there's been so much that we've done, so much that we've uncovered. I think really at the end of the day, what myself and our team wants to do is uncover something cool. Like, regardless of if that's, gajillion dollars of money or treasure, anything that can allude to what was there historically, to substantiate the claims that, the legend gives off, right? Just to find something tangible. As far as something that we've already done, I mean, some of the craziest things that I've seen, again, that wasn't aired, were things like those banknotes or like these maps, like being able to see what is potentially, an original map that's all the way back from 1940s. Seeing something like that is a really cool experience that you don't get to, not everybody gets to do. One interview I did this year as well that wasn't aired, I met a gentleman who was 97 years old. He was a POW that was in one of the camps in the Philippines.
Oh, wow.
He was on the hell ships. He was on, he witnessed the Bataan death marches.
Whoa.
He was in the thick of it. Now, he was what is his name? Henry Chamberlain, 97 years old. If you look him up, they're writing a book about him right now. There's a publisher writing a book about him. But his name's Henry Chamberlain, 97 years old, World War II veteran, POW. He was in a hospital when the Japanese came and raided the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And again, they took anything and everything. They took medical supplies, they took his pen, they took letter openers, you name it, right? And he witnessed all that. And I think bringing it back to, the earlier part of this conversation about the Japanese using tunnels, the Japanese Army using tunnels. Now, for him personally, as an American prisoner of war, they never used Americans to dig tunnels, and that's his, first-hand account. They never used him, so he wasn't aware of, them digging tunnels at all. So he couldn't speak on that. But when he was on the hell ships, they used him for agricultural work mainly and grunt work. But when he was on the hell ships, those hell ships just contained a massive amount of coal, and these hell ships would go from the Philippines to Japan, in which, when he finally landed in Japan, they had him working in the Mitsubishi mine. The Mitsubishi, like the car company today. Yeah. He was working in the mine as a prisoner, and I thought that was kind of, a crazy moment.
Yeah. No, I mean, I tell people stuff all the time, like, hey, you ever ride in a Schindler elevator? You know that movie, Schindler's List? Yeah, man.
Schindler's List, right? Is that an actual elevator company?
Yeah. It's a thing. So, it's like there's another elevator company where it's pretty much like the other competing elevator company, where it's like, you know what they did? They made ovens for the Nazis. When you start going through history and you start seeing these crazy things like IBM taking part in the numbering system for camps. You know, like
it gets intense, and it's again like this legend. It's one of those things where it's like, did that really happen?
yeah,
it's one of those things. It's just so far fetched. It's like,
wow. Did General MacArthur really loot like billions of dollars worth of gold?
When he died, MacArthur had maybe, I don't know, $1 million or $2 to his name.
A whole lot more than a general would have made, especially at that time.
A lot more than a general would have made, but not anywhere near like we're thinking. I mean, at least that was what was reported.
Yeah. And, well, you know, and like we said, whether or not that stuff is actually historically traced back there, we have yet to fully see. In a lot of ways, there is more and more being declassified on the daily just because of age. There is more and more being declassified on the daily due to FOIA requests by good people like yourself, by good people like Roland, you know, who are doing research, people like Mike Turber, who we have on the show regularly. So people like y'all are out there making these requests, looking into this stuff. And the more that happens, the more we will find out. As this stuff comes, the turn of the century, the turn of time where the people involved are just no more, who does it really hurt to find out? Is basically the way that they think about it.
But they can't speak on it anyway, so let's go ahead and release it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been great talking to you this evening and really shedding some light on a lot of the shadowy past regarding this mystery in history.
No, likewise. It's a fun subject to talk about. I mean, especially as much as I've been researching it.
I'll bet.
You know, there's so many unanswered questions that we get from the show that literally almost every day people are like, hey, I pause this, I get screen caps from people. They're like, you know, this thing right here in that episode, what's this? Can you tell me more about it? And I'm like,
I don't know.
Okay, why not? If I have the time, I'll
Yeah. If you have the time and you know, why not? You know?
Yeah, definitely.
And it's great to be able to talk to somebody like you who is in the know, who is actively uncovering these things, who is in the field doing the hardcore, down in the dirt research, doing the interviews with the professionals who have known this information and done this information for dissertations, papers, books, all kinds of stuff. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show this evening.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks again for having me. I appreciate it, especially as a first podcast. It's been fun.
Hey, man, like I said before the show, I love being people's first podcast. It's such a fun format. It's so great to be able to sit back, have a casual conversation about something so in-depth, something really so hard-hitting that most people have no idea is a part of our actual history. So...
Yeah, no, definitely agree there. I mean, there's a lot to still uncover. So
yeah, exactly.
Tune in next time.
Yeah, keep tuning in. Go if you haven't seen The Lost Gold of World War II, everybody, hop on to your favorite platform. Go check them out. It's on A&E. It is on History Channel. You can get it on Amazon. Like I said, there's enough episodes now that they do Lost Gold afternoons, things like that. So tell them everywhere else that they can go to find out more information about you, Bingo.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty much it. History Channel, A&E. If you want to know more about me or just say hi, bingominerva.com. You'll find my link tree. Other than that, it's pretty much it for me.
All right. Well, please do hold the line while we close things out real quick, Bingo. I'd love to talk to you after. Once again, thank you so much for your time this evening and over the last couple weeks as we've just been pinging back and forth. It's been truly great. So hold the line. I'll be right with you. While you're online checking out bingominerva.com as well as History Channel, A&E, and finding your own episodes of Lost Gold of World War II, I guarantee you people, if you watch Season 1 and 2, you will want to watch them again. I am probably not the only person that has binge watched that 2 seasons in a row twice. It is that good. It is that well done. The information in there is so thick. We literally scraped the surface this evening. So while you're online checking out History Channel, Lost Gold of World War II, while you're online checking out the link tree over at bingominerva.com, make sure to stop on by dudesandbeer.com. That is where you can find all the episodes. That is where you can find COVID relief places. That is where you can find our knowledge vault and all of the great stuff that we shared with you this evening. Make sure to stop on by there, dudesandbeer.com/knowledge vault. Make sure to stop on by our sponsors, podcastcadet.com, our good friends, t-shirttoad.com, as well as HC Universal Network. Podcast. Till next time,
listen to our audio
take care of yourselves, take care of each other. You can't be good, be good at it.
Dudes and Beer app
Bye-bye.
for Android and iDevices, available on Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors and other podcasts on this network, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.